We'll talk Vikings in a second. Let's start with Philadelphia. How discouraging of a loss was this for this team? They get ready. They're in the process of embarking on is a very tough part of the schedule for them, and they start this off with a loss.
Yeah, I don't think this is as discouraging as they sounded, or as Doug sounded in his post-game press conference. It's hard with the emotion of the game to really put things in perspective. But this is a team that has a lot of things to overcome. It historically has been a D-line driven team. That's how they've gotten pressure, but they have multiple injuries on the D-line. Then they try to mix and match pressure. You saw how that worked out against Atlanta. The injuries to the secondary have been dramatic. They need to figure out a way to cobble things together defensively, because they're in a bad spot, and it's not going to get better anytime soon. Now, that being said, they can do so many things offensively, and it's going to have to be driven that way throughout the course of the season. Do I think the sky is falling? No, because they're in a division with that
where
is
the sky's falling for a lot of other teams.
Everybody, it's a toss-up now. So it's how well they can manage the problems that they have defensively, while maximizing what they can do offensively, and that's going to get better as Deshaun Jackson comes back.
See, did you think this was a disappointing, discouraging loss for the Eagles?
Well, if you look at the Vikings, how the Vikings have struggled as far as their passing game, I thought it was very, very disappointing. But they do have some obvious weaknesses, in that being their pass defense. We knew was going to suffer coming into the season. We knew their corners were going to be a weak spot in this defense. But typically, they don't give you the time to throw the ball deep down the field the way the Vikings were able to do. So to see Kirk Cousins thrive against a team that's one of the marquee teams, which this wasn't prime time, but it was prime time for me, because the Vikings needed this game. Going against the Eagles is the competition. I thought they did some great things from a pass protection standpoint. They only sent three receivers into the route, went with 6, 7, and 8-man protections, moved Kirk Cousins out of the pocket to give him another launch angle, and had those wide receivers chew up those cornerbacks. So, to me, I thought the Vikings really adapted to what they've been dealing with, and Kirk Cousins realizes he's got to be able to play better for this team to be able to reach its potential. And yesterday was Kirk Cousins at his best, Nick.
Listen, I want to give the Vikings full credit, because we went into this game talking about how the winner of this game stays in that potential elite category, and the loser of the game starts having to ask really hard questions. And the Vikings stepped up. They jumped all over Philly in the beginning. Kirk Cousins had back-to-back excellent games. The concern, though, for Philly, the obvious concern is we saw what this Vikings team did against the Giants secondary, which is considered one of the weakest secondaries on one of the weakest defenses in football. Thielen had a really good game. Cousins had a really good game. They scored 28 points. And now against the Eagles secondary, Cousins has a great game. Diggs has a great game. And they score 38 points. And if Philadelphia cannot rush the passer, who is Philadelphia? The question I would ask the Eagles right now is, what are you great at? What is the thing you can hang your hat on other than the NFC East stinks? Right now, it feels like what Philly can do is similar to last year, where they were alive late in the season, even though they had quarterback injuries. They seemed to have some type of Super Bowl hangover. Well, no one's running away with this division. If they were in the division the Vikings are in, we would say they're cooked. We would say right now they are probably the worst team in that division. And Carson Wentz didn't play terribly. They stopped Dalvin Cook, and they get run out of the gym in a game where, and I know, Coach, you hate when I do this, but that schedule is coming. You have at Dallas, fine. At Dallas all of a sudden doesn't look that hard. Buffalo has one loss. Chicago's one of the best defenses in football. Then you have New England undefeated, and then Seattle with one loss. You are playing 4 of the best teams in the league over the next 6 weeks, and going to Minnesota and losing, there's no shame in that. But being blown out from the very beginning, you got to ask some really tough questions if you're in that Eagles locker room.
Well, Philadelphia did pull within, 3 or 4 points. And then, so it's not like they were totally blown out in this game. The game was competitive for a while. I give Minnesota a ton of credit, though, for staying with the running game. And even though they averaged 3.5 yards a carry, they ran the ball 35 times. That's who Minnesota needs to be. They need to start with the running game, and they're the second best team right now in terms of running the ball.
The Niners, yep.
They've got one of the top defenses. So by doing that and having the patience, which most teams don't have the patience when you're only averaging 3.5 yards a carry, it opens up everything else for Kirk Cousins. And this is what Cousins should do. The fact that he's had receivers as good as he's had that have been MIA through the first part of the season, that should never happen. This is the type of team they should be, and I give them a lot of credit for staying with the running game because that opened up everything they did in the passing game.
But for me with the Eagles, the frustrating thing is what we've seen the last couple of games is where they start slow and then they have to play catch up and then they run out of game. And Doug Peterson wants to keep putting on himself, but he said, yeah, we got to find a way to start faster. This has been a theme. It was a theme last year and it's a theme this year. They come out, they start slow, then they sort of have to kind of play catch up until they have to try to stay competitive. CC, what?
Well, one thing that I think, Jen, I think you make a great point about the slow starts. But I'm going to take you guys back to week number 2. And Coach Mangini will tell you this. I've never been in a situation where we didn't have enough bodies to be able to practice. And that's how the Eagles started off the season. Now, we know they have wholesale injuries across the board, but when you can't practice, and yes, I know they've been practicing since then, but the continuity of practice, and because they can do so many things offensively, do you ever really get great at one thing? So for me, that second week when they weren't able to practice because of the bodies, now more injuries are happening. Is that hurting the continuity that affects us in our first 15 or 30 plays? It takes us a while before the offense and before the team gets into the flow of the game. Coach Mangini, I posed that to you. I thought that was a problem earlier in the season. Do you see that as a problem continuing to move forward?
Yeah, it's always difficult when you can't put things together during the course of the week, and then you go into the game and you're trying to get that timing, that rhythm, and all the things that you need to do to execute effectively in the start of the game, but you haven't really had the opportunity to practice at any kind of tempo. It's tough, and they do need to address the slow starts, and it's easier said than done, and I'm sure they're putting a lot of time and effort into it. It just does make it difficult when you can't actually work on it during the course of the week.
Eagles and Cowboys now tied for first place in the division.
Philly should be sending Sam Darnold some type of edible arrangement or gift basket this week.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.